In the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to reflect on a metaphor. And the metaphor is lifting your thinking. And that metaphor suggests that thinking is something that you can actually lift up. And those words have been used in other contexts to suggest, like lifting your game in a sport, is that you can raise the quality somehow of a process. And in the case of lifting your thinking, there's an assumption here that a lot of our day-to-day thinking now is of a lower quality. And you might notice that particularly in the digital realm, the realm of smartphones and computers, where there's a very high degree of distraction. So you might be sitting on a bus, you might be driving or walking along, and you may be engaged in some sort of thought process. You might be thinking through something that's happened to you, or looking ahead and planning something, or you might just be thinking about a concept or an idea. And then the phone rings or vibrates with a text, and your thinking is distracted. And when it's distracted, it can often be broken. You can often lose the thread. And so what you were thinking about, you get drawn away from it and you never quite come back to the same place. And so what you carry in your forward thinking now is a broken narrative, a bit like a story where you started to read it and then put it down. And when you pick it up again, you've lost your page, or you've even picked up a different book. Now, if that happens a lot, and that distraction happens a lot, our thinking can become fractured. Each little bit of thinking doesn't join up like different pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And at some point later, when you're kind of trying to draw the threads together, it is like building a jigsaw puzzle with different pieces from different boxes. So one aspect of lifting your thinking can be just to sit down for a few minutes and to look back over the day. And you might notice if you play that day back, sometimes you can start now and go backwards, almost like in reverse order. You might find those broken threads again, and you might notice some agitation in you, something that doesn't feel quite right, something that feels unresolved. And you might find in that a memory, and that's a memory of a thinking process that became broken in terms of a narrative thread, where the story suddenly stopped because you were distracted. And then what you can do is you can finish off that thinking. And you might find actually that when you do that, that something feels a little bit resolved inside you than you're feeling. And you may even find yourself taking actions and decisions that are all the better for having picked up that lost thread. Now, of course, other ways to deal with that, to raise your thinking, is to stop that thinking being distracted in the first place. To find spaces and times during the day, physical spaces and times that you've chosen, where you're going to do a bit of thinking without that distraction. That can be in your garden, that can be just with all the devices switched off, and you might sit in your living room or at your kitchen table. You might find a quiet space in the park to do a bit of thinking where distraction is less likely to happen, where you can be on your own, where you can collect yourself together. And I love that metaphor, collecting yourself together. There's some evidence also that a lot of digital distraction, phone distraction, smartphones, computers, computer tablets, particularly at night, can disturb our sleep. And then we can wake up in the morning knowing that our sleep's been disturbed, trying to think about dreams that we've had that we can't quite grasp. And we often forget dreams, but it can also be that it's just the process of thinking about them that is also distracted because we didn't prepare ourselves for our sleep. Just with a bit of quiet, just with a bit of breathing. And sometimes just thinking through the day backwards, just reflecting on the day without distraction can actually enhance your sleep. And you can wake up in the morning sometimes with resolutions because the story's been allowed to play out in your dream life. I think that can happen too with thinking during the day as well. So this isn't a denial of digital devices in terms of saying they're all bad, but it is affirmation that taking control, actually placing those digital devices more consciously, can allow your thinking to raise quality, because thinking things through is a bit like reading a story through. It's a bit like seeing a decision through, that we come to a place and we can look back and there feels a kind of wholeness about the process that we've gone through. So one approach to raising your thinking is definitely to start to take control of distraction in your life. And in this modern world, most of that distraction is often digital distraction. This is one aspect of raising your thinking, simply by lifting it up, by ensuring that the things that drag it down to a lower quality don't happen. And one of those things is digital distraction.